Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we are going to be having a look at what is possibly the greatest piece of 17th century music to come out of England. You may already know it, or if you don't, you can see if you agree with that idea by the time we get to the end. But boy, this is a piece to blow anybody away, because you have to start with the notion of when it was written. We're talking about the 1600s here. Henry Purcell, wonderful English composer. And this excerpt we're going to look at comes from his opera Dido and Aeneas. Well, first of all, we have a recitative. Thy hand, Belinda, darkness shades me. On thy bosom let me rest. More I would, but death invades me. Death is now a welcome guest. So you get the drama of it from there. Now, just to kind of get yourself in the mood for a piece written in the 1600s here. We're not talking about a 19th century full-blown romantic piece here. We're talking about a Baroque piece. Let's see what's actually going on in terms of the emotional engagement with that, because I think it's quite remarkable. So have a listen to this. Now this is just the recitative, you know, the idea that we're advancing the plot in some way and just having a few kind of simple chords in order to accompany that. But look what goes on here. It's remarkable, isn't it? We start with this chord of C minor, thy hand, Belinda, and then I immediately have what's a secondary dominant to F minor. So to paint this idea of darkness with this decoration in the vocal line. And then we have a minor chord for shades me. Then we have this rather nice dissonance. Hear that A flat going to the G. That's a rather nice moment, isn't it? While we're listening to a 7B chord in the key of F minor, onto the F minor, and just a hint of dissonance again. You hear that 7/6 going on in the vocal line, and then rest, and everything stops on rest. So that's painting, isn't it, the idea of rest? Now where do we go from there? We go on to a dominant 7th in the key of C, fair enough. Death invading, going on to a tonic chord of C major there. But now in order to kind of really put across this notion of death, suddenly C minor. Very dramatic, isn't it? That change from major to minor for the death is now. And then chord of D major, interesting. It's the dominant of G minor, which is where we're going to go in the aria. But then listen to this kind of decorated cadence, a welcome guest. What a dissonance that is. Oh, isn't that wonderful? You know, this note here, that F sharp with this chord. It's a really dissonant moment, isn't it? And then we also got this going on under here. And then what do we get when we get there? Well, you know, this actually is an Italian 6. An Italian 6 before the chord 5. So that's a wonderful moment, isn't it? The welcome guest. Death, the welcome guest. Then it leads us on the dominant chord in suspense for the aria that comes afterwards, which is kind of reflecting on this particular advance in the plot. So we're looking at death when I'm laid in earth. And you see this kind of emotionally profound. And this is all based on a ground bass, a repeated bass line that comes 11 times during this aria. It's a remarkable bass line in itself because it's so chromatic. Again, keep reminding yourself, we're in the 1600s here. And so this bass line just goes completely chromatically. Here's the bass line. So that's the bass line, and you'll notice it just keeps repeating, and this is what Purcell bases the whole thing on. Well, that's quite a tall order to harmonise if you're a 17th century Baroque composer, isn't it? You know, which key are we in? Well, we're in G minor. It starts in G, goes to F sharp. We have a cadence at the end of it, sort of 4, 5, 1. But in between, we've got all this chromatic stuff going on. So he's really got to think how he's going to harmonise all this. Well, let's see what happens. Let's get the flavour of it. So we just start with the bass line, and then you notice it just keeps repeating. So we've got this ground bass here, and then here it comes again. And then here it comes again. And it just keeps going on, repeating itself 11 times. Quite a remarkable thing. And I don't know if you've ever tried writing a piece with a ground bass, but it's very easy to kind of run out of steam because once you've harmonized it once, well, is there anything you can do differently the second time? Or if you're putting a melodic line to it, well, how many different things can you do? Well, just see what Purcell does. It's just knockout. Let's get a flavor of it. See, that's absolutely remarkable piece, isn't it? The other thing to notice about the ground bass thing is this lovely rhythmic touch. You notice we've got all these bars where you've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we've got the repeated rhythm, a 2-beat note followed by a 1-beat note. Then right at the end, he reverses it and goes from here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So it's got a lovely kind of rhythmic turn just before the end of the bass, which is lovely. Now, what about that melodic line that goes over the top of it? And what about the harmony? Let's just have a look at what's going on when Dido starts to sing at this point. So we start with a G minor chord, fair enough. We have a passing note in the melodic line, which is fine. We're still in G minor. And then we've got this wonderful moment. Now, what's going on? I mean, this is basically a 5/7 B chord, so that's fair enough. But that B flat is so emotionally telling. Aren't laid. You see the one I mean? This note here, because that's just an added dissonance, isn't it? So you see how that's actually doing. It's a kind of 4/3 suspension, a slightly unusual one. It's prepared here, it's sounded here, it's resolved there, so it's following the rules of a suspension. But the bass is an F sharp, B flat. Interesting, isn't it? Because it's certainly not a perfect fourth, is it? So it's a diminished fourth going to that third. So very kind of telling thing. You could also say that the B flat is part of an extension of the 5/7 chord, because if this is the 5/7 chord, D, F sharp, A, C, well, 9, 11, 13. Henry Purcell, 1600 and whatever it is, writing dominant 13ths. Goodness gracious me. Something that many people think were invented by the jazzers of the 20th century. Well, it's a suspension, but it's creating that 5/13, isn't it? Which is kind of a bit amazing for its day. Now, the joy doesn't end there, because what do we do next when we come to this chord onto the next bar? Well, this chord is a 5-7D, so a dominant seventh in its last inversion, but in a different key, in the key of C. Now, whenever you have a 5-7, you never know if it belongs to its tonic major or its tonic minor. Well, this is a 5-7 in last inversion, and it's going to C major. Now, we might expect it to go to C minor because it could be some kind of secondary dominant, i.e. you're going 5-7 to 1, but 1 is a chord in the prevailing key. So if we went 5-7 last inversion to C minor, well, that chord of C minor is chord 4 in the home key of G minor. But Purcell doesn't do that. He goes to C major. So that's a quite remarkable move as well. Furthermore, that's not the end of it, because he manages to tuck in a 7-6 suspension. My goodness. So hear that D and then D, C. So we not only have the shock of going from this previous chord to a dominant seventh in a different key in its last inversion, then the shock of going to C major rather than C minor, but we also on top of that have this kind of quite dissonant 7-6 suspension. Over the top of that, the singer is doing this wonderful dotted rhythm coming down the scale just to make it even more complex, which is an amazing kind of pile up of dissonance, isn't it? And absolutely wonderfully handled. Then we have this lovely move next, where we're going to a C minor chord, partly induced by the chromatic bass, but F sharp in the Dido's part. What? Well, what's F sharp doing there? Well, it should be G, shouldn't it? Because that would belong to that C minor chord. But it comes down the scale from laid to F sharp as a dissonance that then resolves onto the G. Absolutely wonderful. And then we come to earth, and there's a kind of moment of repose on that dominant chord. Then as we go on, well, life is a bit more normal, you might think. 1 in first inversion, but with this lovely upper auxiliary note in the vocal line. And then as we go to chord 4, we have this accented passing note on the first note of wrongs. That D is an accented passing note. And then we have a pretty standard cadence. 1 in second inversion, 5, 1. So great, we've got to the end of the second playing of the bass line, the first one with the vocal line. That's been pretty remarkable, isn't it? So you think, well, there's nothing else that you could possibly do from there. Well, let's see what happens when we look at this next phrase. No trouble in thy breast. Well, first of all, he comes up with this interesting idea of an E flat major chord for that G. Interesting, you know, if you compare, when we previously had this G, we just had a G minor chord. Now we've got an E flat major chord. So if we're in the key of G minor, that's chord 6, it's 6 in second inversion. And then we're going on to this. Now I think that's incredibly expressive, that E flat dissonance there, because the chord itself, well, that's, you know, a 5-7 in its first inversion, but then what about that E flat? Well, it's a ninth, isn't it? It's making it a dominant ninth. You can't even say that it's some kind of suspension. You know, if it was going to do this, you could say, oh, well, that's a 7-6 suspension. But actually, this time, it's a genuine ninth because it's falling a fifth. So it must be a harmony note, a chord tone. And then we come to a kind of resolution here, where we've got this kind of 5 in first inversion. And then what does Purcell get up to? Well, F natural in the bass, but suddenly a B flat major chord, if you don't mind. So we've just had a D major chord, the dominant of G minor, and then we get a B flat major chord. Pretty radical stuff, isn't it, for the time? Nice expressive passing note in the accompaniment there. And then what happens next? Well, we've got this gorgeous chord when we come to trouble. And what's going on here? Well, what's this chord? It looks like a sort of 2-7 in D minor or something, doesn't it? I mean, what's that doing there, really? And then you get this, which has got nothing to do with the previous chord, really. So that is quite remarkable, isn't it? And you might think, well, it's looking like a sort of 5/7 in G minor, but we've still got E in the bass. So if that is a 5/7, well, what is that E? It's a kind of major ninth of a, dominant major ninth. Very strange, isn't it? With a ninth in it and the bass, last inversion. Then it kind of settles and we go to a C minor first inversion. And then we go to a dominant seventh, that's fine. And then interestingly, this time the singer drops out and has a rest. So we just have the accompaniment finishing off the bass with a fairly straightforward harmonic progression this time. 1 in first inversion, 2/7 in first inversion, 1 in second inversion, 5/1. So it's giving you a kind of standard cadence there. So what's interesting is that Purcell has harmonized that in quite a different way from the first way through the bass with the voice. And then you think, well, if we're having this 11 times, well, we've only had it 3 times. So what's going to go on next? Well, let's just take a look on. We've got the flavor of this now. It's remarkable. But here's the next phrase from the end of this page, which goes like this. So this is a bit familiar. We had this sort of thing in the first phrase, didn't we? And then if we just go on to the next bit again, well, you can see the same thing as the first phrase. So he's gone back to that first phrase. And then this is looking from this point, the no trouble, a little bit like the second phrase. Okay. And now we've got the orchestra finishing off, as we did before. But notice now we have this wonderful vocal interjection. These remember me. It's kind of like an emotional pleading, isn't it? Remember me. Even though death is upon us. And then you have this little exchange with the orchestra. It's very poignant, isn't it? Having had this, then the remember me on the repeated note, and then just the orchestra doing this chromatic thing again, and then another remember me. Oh, with that lovely dissonance, and then the orchestra again, and then the voice in, but forget my fate. And then you get touches like this, you see, where you end up with a diminished seventh over the tonic. Oh, remarkable for the time. If this had come a couple of centuries later, we'd be impressed with it. But this is just so ahead of its time, really. And then it all settles here on the dominant chord in first inversion, immediately contradicted by the F natural. So we get a D minor, and then the remember me soars up in the vocal line. And it's a real climax there, isn't it? That highest note. And you see what's happening here with the harmony. We've got this kind of the chord that we thought might be a sort of 2/7 in D minor once before. Maybe it's a kind of 7/7 in F. I mean, it's not entirely clear, but I think that's possibly the context here. But then the E flat, and then this gorgeous moment here, yet one more gorgeous moment, D minor 7. It's amazing. And then back to G minor, and then we're going into a cadence we've heard before. 1 C, 5, 1. And then after this, but forget my fate. The voice drops out. Then we have the bass twice more. Just the orchestra now, just kind of allowing the audience to reflect on what's just been said. But listen to all this chromatic stuff going on above the bass. Absolutely remarkable. Well, I hope I've made my case for Purcell. Purcell is an amazing composer, but he doesn't come more amazing than that. I think that is one of the most remarkable pieces in the history of music. And if you put it in the context of where the English Baroque was at this point in the 1600s, this is just on another plane, really. Absolutely remarkable. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, you might be interested in coming to join us at Music Matters Maestros. So if you go onto our website, www.mmcourses.co.uk, on the home page, you'll see something you can tap on called Maestros. So what's Maestros all about? Well, we've got 3 levels. Level 1 is a kind of support level. So if you value the content that we put on the channel, and we try to put plenty of content out there, you can join us as a level 1 member, and that's just a very kind of minimal support level, which really helps us enormously, and comes with interesting perks, emojis and other exciting things as well. If you want to get more involved in Maestros, well, have a look at level 2, where there are further perks, and you can come and join us for our monthly live stream in the company of other people from around the world, where I make a kind of input of an hour's solid teaching, where we've got more time to do things in more detail than we have in these videos. So you could come along and be part of that, be part of the live chat where we can exchange views, get to know each other better. People can ask questions, we can interact a bit more. Lots of people are really valuing that. And if you want to go a step further, and none of this, by the way, is related to ability. Anybody at any level of ability is welcome at any level. But level 3 also gives you access to a further live stream each month. And during the live stream, we invite members to contribute their own work. So if you want to submit a composition or a recording of your own performance, whatever it is you want to do, I'll happily give you one-to-one feedback on that. And we share that with the group so that everybody learns from each other. It's an incredibly supportive group of people, all these different levels. A lovely way to get to know other musicians, and lots of people who join in the level 2 and level 3 groups tell us how wonderful it is to connect with other musicians who are experiencing the same successes and the same struggles, and how much they value it and learn from it. So all that's there, including other perks like discounts on courses at level 3 and so on. But you can see all about it on that Maestros link. Also, while you're on the home page, you could click on courses, and that will give you access to all of our courses. All the videos that you've been watching on the channel are kind of one-offs. The courses are structured A to Z, which means that if you really want to get hold of something, aural training, theory training, orchestration, learning to write harmonized chorales in the style of Bach, whatever it is you want to do, you'll find a course there that takes you A to Z through that particular project. Anyway, have a look and see what's there for you.